this is Liz J. Simpson, and welcome back to another episode of Women Consulting Corporate. Today's episode is one that I think is one of the most important episodes we will ever have, because on this episode, we're going to talk about you and how to maintain your health and well-being. I think too often we forget that you don't build a business builds you. And so the business can't survive if you're not taking good care of yourself. And so I feel that we have the most perfect guest for today's episode. I am joined by Dr. Reba Peoples, who is the founder of Amara Health and Wellness. Dr. Peoples specializes in helping Black women, entrepreneurs, and leaders to do wellness differently so that they can do business differently. So if you're wondering how you can rethink wellness and sustain your health and grow your business, make sure you listen on to today's episode. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm thrilled that you're here as well. You know, we worked together for a year and I never had the chance to meet you in person. So this is like, I'm like, girl, I just want to catch up.
Right.
And they can hear as we catch up too. So thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes. So I gave an introduction, but I'd love for you to jump in and talk more about like your work, how you found yourself doing your work, your passion for it. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Oh, definitely. So I am a board certified psychiatrist and founder of Amara Health and Wellness. I originally started out in clinical practice. And what I found in clinical practice was a lot of what we sort of label as dysfunction are really functional adaptations to dysfunctional environments. So oftentimes people would come to me with things like depression and stress and anxiety. And I found myself in a position where I'm expected to help them navigate through that through this lens of, personal resilience while ignoring the larger, systemic and structural factors that really influence how we experience wellness and how we experience ourselves. So that's what really led me into exploring health and wellness from a more holistic perspective and from a perspective that really honors who we are as people of African descent and really understanding how kind of the different structures that we sort of find ourselves navigating through can really influence how we view wellness.
We had a conversation earlier this year, I believe, about your work, and it resonated so deeply for me. And I really want more individuals to hear that. Mm-hmm. Tell me more what this looks like. So, you talk about the functional adaptations. Mm-hmm. Translate that to us, like break it down for us, what that means and what that really looks like.
So when we think about things like stress and anxiety or even, perfectionism, a lot of that is a direct response to, if we think about things like capitalism and consumerism and this idea that your value is tied to your capacity to produce labor. So a lot of times people have this sense that their, sense of self-worth and their sense of being, their, sense of identity is really tied to, the roles that they play in the world. So when you are able to understand that your existence alone is your permission for peace and joy and well-being, it's not something that has to be, earned or deserved. It's really your birthright as a human being. I think you start to move through the world differently. And you do start to recognize that a lot of those ways of being that have helped you navigate the world are ways that you've learned to survive a hostile environment, essentially. So really, once you realize that, you're able to give yourself grace, able to make different choices. So when we kind of know better, we do better. So.
Yes. That's such a word. You've said 2 sentences and I'm already trying not to get emotional because I, as an entrepreneur and as someone who works with other entrepreneurs and even leaders and Black women, there is this culture of like doing to be good enough. Like what accolades, how can I level the playing ground so that I'll be recognized as a contributing player or just as an equal, right? And so there's so much of this weight that oftentimes I don't even know to give a language to, that I'm just operating with it. And so it's so affirming to hear you talk about it in your work and to give perspective and strategies for how we can overcome that. So speaking to that, for an entrepreneur or leader who might have, stress, depression, anxiety that they're kind of realizing, or through your work, they're helping to realize like, okay, this might be a response to something else. Like, what do the steps look like? Like, where does one start in that journey?
Mm-hmm. So at least when I work with clients, I have what I call an emotional liberation framework.
I love it.
And that really, when we think about emotional liberation, to me, it means being able to love all of who you are, being able to live fully and authentically, and to find ways to be able to cultivate internal calm, even in the midst of external chaos. And in order to get there, there are 3 steps essentially. So kind of the first step is context. So really understanding how did we find ourselves sort of in this sort of moment in history. So really understanding not only our personal history, but really understanding, larger, historical issues, cultural issues, systemic issues that have also contributed. Once we have that context, then it's important to really do that self-work and get internal clarity around how have these things influenced how I view myself and how I move through the world. And once we have that context, once we have the clarity, then it's time to take inspired action and really kind of make different choices that really center well-being and really learn how to create boundaries that really center wellness, and learning how to find safe spaces allow you to fully be yourself in a way that is authentic and empowering.
There's so much there I want to break down. Okay. Like, this is just like what I love. And this was happened in our last conversation. You just so calmly drop jewels. You're just like, okay, this is the way it is. And I'm like, you just dropped 3 mics. So, okay, I want to go back to context. So when you talk about context and understanding systemic context, as a board certified psychiatrist, what does that work look like? Because to me, it sounds like a history lesson, right? Like, how do you help facilitate that for your clients or for others, right? How should they facilitate that for themselves?
Exactly. And a lot of it is a history lesson. And that's part of why I kind of stepped out of clinical practice, because you can't really do that education within the context of a medication management visit. So at least when we do meet with our, small group coaching or even one-on-one coaching, a lot of the work really is understanding some of those larger factors. So, being able to identify racial trauma, really being able to identify cultural mismatch, and also being able to understand, family of origin issues as well that might also contribute.
I have all the questions.
Okay.
Cultural mismatch. Let's start there. What does that look like?
So cultural mismatch, really, if we think about who we are as people of African descent, generally African cultures are spiritualist in that we believe that there is divinity within all aspects of nature. So the rock, the tree, the grass, they're divine. Whereas living in a Western society, Western cultural values tend to be materialist. Materialist in that if you can't see it, touch it, taste it, smell it, you can't measure it, it's not real. So there's sort of this empiricist view of the world. And when you have that view, there's a separation between spirit and matter. Whereas when you are more of a spiritualist person from your background, you recognize that there is divinity within. And when there's divinity within matter, I am divine. Yes. So when you understand that you are divine, your sense of self is innate. It's not something that you have to compare yourself or compete. Whereas when you do have this sense that divinity is outside of you, your only sense of value can come from competition and comparison. So, if I'm smarter than that person, if I'm prettier than that person, if I have more money than that person, then I have value. So really being able to understand and navigate that, we tend to be people who are non-transactional in our interactions with people because of that sense of divinity. So when you go into spaces where it is very transactional, what can you do for me rather than, how can we kind of vibe as individuals? How can we, mutually help each other? It can be, very confusing and distressing because there's this sense of betrayal when you think that this person genuinely has your interests in mind when it is just a transaction. So being able to understand that is also super, super important.
Wow. I'm thinking about so many experiences when I listen to you. You've given language to something I've experienced but didn't have the language for, right? When we talk about entrepreneurs, like when you talk about that per se, when you're working with entrepreneurs, it's like I'm building a business. The business needs revenue to sustain itself. And I'm also navigating this journey. How does one find, I don't know if balance is the word, but how does one navigate both of those at the same time? Or typically, what do you see as best practices for that?
So at least the framework that I recommend is really, it's very simple. And it's maybe easier said than done, but it is a simple framework. So pretty much SMART. So it's important to make smart decisions. And SMART is an acronym, and that has to do with those modifiable issues that can influence our well-being. So S is sleep. Most of us don't get enough of it. So really prioritizing getting enough restful, restorative sleep is really key.
What makes it restful, restorative? Because I see you added words to that.
Right. So ideally 7 to 9 hours. And you also want to, there are, behaviors surrounding sleep that are important. So what we call sleep hygiene practices. So things like not using your bed for anything other than sleeping. So if you're watching television in bed, on your devices in bed, that really, your brain never gets the signal that the bed is the place to wind down and rest. So it is harder to get into those kind of restorative phases of sleep. Getting enough darkness in your room. A lot of us have all sorts of devices and things beeping. So being able to kind of have complete darkness is important. Being aware of the blue light exposure from your devices. So trying to be device free for an hour or two before bedtime. So that's why your devices have night mode, because the blue light from your devices actually tricks your retina into thinking it's still daylight. So it's harder to produce melatonin. So that's why people wear the blue light blocking glasses or the night mode, so that they can also, get more restorative sleep. So those are sort of the little things.
You did one of the 5, and I'm already like, okay, I have 5 notes I need to take, because I am literally working on that laptop until I pass out in my bed. Okay. All right. S, I'm failing at. I got to do better at S. Okay. What are the other acronyms in SMART?
And there's movement. So physically moving your body. Ideally, aerobic activity that gets your heart rate elevated. So 20 minutes of aerobic exercise 4 days per week can actually be as effective as an antidepressant for mild to moderate depression. So we do have a very potent internal pharmacy that we can make use of. Just by moving our bodies. So movement is definitely key. A is awareness. So having some form of mindfulness practice. So being, fully present in the moment in a non-judgmental way. And the reason that's important is it actually can, we build new neural networks when we have a regular meditation practice or mindfulness practice. So, our prefrontal cortex, we get sort of more thickness in the area of our brain that has to do with things like, logic and reason and rational decision making. So meditation, mindfulness, definitely important. The R is recognition. So really knowing who you are outside of what you do, which we touched on earlier. And then T is tailoring inputs into your body. So really thinking about how you feed yourself. Not only how you feed yourself nutritionally, but really thinking about how you feed your mind, how you feed your spirit. So really thinking about the type of media that you're consuming, the quality of relationships. So are you surrounding yourself with people who are positive and affirming? So those would be kind of the things to be aware of if we are trying to kind of create a lifestyle that sustains wellness.
I love this. I have so much homework to do. I'm excited. I think S is the one that requires the most work for me. T, the tailoring. I've been focused on that. That was boundaries or something I've been struggling with. I don't know if I want to claim struggle in it, but tailoring was a big piece for me. And I find a lot of the women we work with as entrepreneurs, that's a big one. All of them are pieces that many of us struggle with, but especially for women entrepreneurs, when we talk about the T and like the relationships and finding edifying communities and people who support you and being around loved ones who may not understand what you're doing. Is that something that you find a lot in your work, that the T is a struggle, and do you have best practices for that? Is it that you cut someone off until you're ready for another way? Do you find how to better navigate those relationships? I know that's a loaded question,
Right.
Dr. Peoples.
That's a big one. And I think it is important to find your community and be able to surround yourself with people who do pour into you. So really thinking about doing that internal check-in when you're around certain people. So, I mean, there are certain people that you're around them and you just feel amazing. So you're energized and feel like you can take on the world. And then there are other people that you sort of leave their presence and you feel, drained and depleted and exhausted. So kind of once you have been able to do that check-in, then setting those boundaries. So it may be that you go, less often and don't stay as long.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm never one to kind of say you need to just cut everybody off. If a lot of times it's our family members that might be the people who leave us drained and depleted. So just really being aware that when we talk about boundaries, we're not talking about what we expect other people to do. Boundaries really are about what we expect from ourselves and what we are going to tolerate.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I have to sit with that. I appreciate that. In your work, and I know all of it is a challenge, right? And a lifestyle change. What do you find to be some of the greatest challenges in your work in helping individuals to navigate the frameworks and find themselves to a more improved approach to wellness?
I think some of the biggest challenges are that sort of deprogramming. So I think a lot of times we become our own oppressors without really recognizing it. And I've fallen victim to it myself. And it's like, I'm actually coming off of a year of rest myself.
A year? Wait a second.
1 year, yes.
She didn't say a weekend. She said a year. First of all, you have to qualify what that means and what that looks like.
Right. So I pretty much stepped away from my business. So the pandemic was rough. And I think anybody who is in a helping and healing profession really felt it. And for me, I can't give if I'm depleted. So I did have to take that time to just do that kind of internal replenishment and also, do some, reading and kind of, formulating my craft. So really coming back stronger, but doing it in a way that does feel positive and affirming and kind of energizing and life-giving, not, I'm doing this because I have to.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to ask a question and you can skirt it if it's something you don't want to answer. Did you feel like with your year of rest, you were taken to a point where like your body was like, you're going to take this year whether you want to or not? Or did you feel like you proactively realized this is something I want to do?
I'd say it was the latter, just kind of with the work that I have been doing this long, I was able to identify the signs and say, you know what, just step back and take care of yourself right now. So.
Okay. That leads to my next question then. How does someone see that? Like, how can, how can someone realize these signs are here? Here's how to recognize them early before they become too problematic. What are some signs that you might see with the client that you're like, okay, something has to give right now?
Right. So sleep can be one sign. So if you're finding that you're having kind of restless sleep or having a hard time getting good quality sleep, even though you're devoting enough, hours, but sleep is restless, that can be a potential sign. Things like, stress, tension, anxiety, irritability, being, snappier than usual, having a short fuse can also be a sign that you might be heading toward a little bit of burnout, not getting as much enjoyment or excitement out of the things that normally do bring you joy, starting to isolate, can all be potential signs that, you might be at a point where, you might need to think about resting or, even, reaching out to get some help. So to see a therapist or, a body worker or somebody who can help you navigate through what you're going through. So.
If you're listening to us and you're recognizing these signs, we hope that you will definitely take action on that so that you can stay healthy and find another path for yourself. I appreciate this conversation because I don't think I think we are starting to make a shift, possibly. I know a lot of people are challenging the narrative of the hustle and the way that culture is. And I feel like during the pandemic, some people had a taste of like the world stopping for a second. And so then now going back to the way things were is like, wait a second, I saw another way.
Right.
And now can I just jump back into the status quo? So I feel like there's a little bit of awareness, but I do recognize just even my children, I'm like, gosh, that the pandemic was really hard from a mental health perspective. So I appreciate this. Tell me about clients. Like when is the right time for a client to engage you, whether that's an individual leader or an organization? You know, we talked about on an individual spectrum how you might recognize signs, but how can you recognize signs from like a larger institutional standpoint?
Well, I think looking at things like your retention rates, if you are losing key talent, especially, employees of color, really trying to understand what that may be about. A lot of times there are mental health issues that can influence whether or not people feel comfortable staying in certain environments or certain organizations. So I'd say that would be a big sign. And, also doing that work to sort of engage your employees. So do you have any sort of process for surveying to see what the needs are? And a lot of times they'll let you know what the needs are if you ask.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Once you're working with an organization, what do you find to be the greatest challenge there? Is it cultural or, and we talk about it from an individual level, but when you're working with a larger organization, what do you find to be the challenges in the work that you do and creating impact for them?
I think going back to cultural mismatch may be a big issue because ultimately a corporation the goal is to create profit for the organization. So when you do try to introduce a framework that is more humanistic, that can sometimes be a challenge if the organization isn't quite ready to embrace that shift.
Okay. I could definitely see that. Oh my goodness. This has been so valuable just when I think about myself as an entrepreneur and the women that we serve and making sure that wellness is a part of that. I'm going to ask a question that may seem obvious, but for those listening, it may not be. Tell me why you specialize in serving Black women. What need did you see? How did you identify that was going to be a place that you would serve?
I think for me, as a Black woman, I think I needed to create what wasn't there for me. So when I sort of had my issues with, burnout and, depression and stress and anxiety, I felt that in working with sort of the traditional mental health system, there was a lot of kind of victim blaming and shaming, and there wasn't a lot of work around personal empowerment and really helping people understand the sort of a holistic approach to wellness. So kind of my frustrations weren't, Prozac deficiency. My frustrations were, a lot more nuanced. And I think that if you're not working with somebody who understands that nuance, it is easy to, take a pill and sort of leave it at that without really diving into some of those deeper issues that do need to be reconciled.
And for you, I mean, for Black women listening, what's part of the solution? Because where I'm coming from is, I'll say as a Black woman who's looked for therapists, I live in San Antonio, Texas. And, one, I think, is there a shortage of like therapists or things of that nature? I'm not going to have the statistic right, but I know that it's been challenging to find, right? Therapists who can recognize my map of the world. And for my husband and I, of course, because I'm on the spot, I'm not going to think about it, but I think it's like brown girl, therapy for brown girls.
Therapy for Black girls.
Yeah, Black girls. I saw there's like a resource for that. And there's one for Black men that has a website. And really all they are like directories that connect you to other ones. But, for you and the work that you do, are you serving individuals all over the country, the world? Is it geographically based? Like, how do you, there's so many women who have this need, like, how do they find sources of people who will recognize that part of their identity and how it corresponds to their wellness?
Right. And I do work with people across the country in my coaching work. So with my clinical work, I am sort of bound by my license. But in terms of the coaching, I am able to work with people regardless of where they live.
Okay, that's perfect. So the answer is y'all need to connect to Dr. P. You all need to get on Amara Health and Wellness right now because everyone listening needs this support 100%. As we wrap up, I want to hear a couple things from you. One, is there anything in particular coming off of this like year of rest and that you're most passionate about or most excited about as you look to the new year? Like what's top of mind for you?
Yeah, I think I'm passionate about getting back out and serving Black women. Yes! So I'm excited about that.
Yes. What did that year look like? Listen, I said I was done, but I'm like, I'm trying to map out my year of rest. Like, did you ever, I have to ask, how did you have self-talk of like, it's enough rest, girl, get back to it? How did you navigate like this year?
It was very organic. So I think I've just sort of naturally started to have more of an interest in kind of picking my business back up. So it wasn't like there was a set date that, okay, this is when you're going to go back. But I don't know, it just sort of organically, you just sort of know when it's time.
Oh, that's even better. I'm thinking there was a time frame. You said, when I'm ready, I'll know. Oh, I love that. And I'm so glad that you have decided that you're ready for the work and when you're in a place of wholeness and fullness. And then with our program, because I didn't even talk about this, I'm like all over the place. I'm already diagnosing the smart for me. That's where I'm at in my head right now. I'm like, okay, so I need the glasses to block the blue lights right now. But with us, so where did we fit in? So we were the Big Money Movement. We've just rebranded to the 12%. I'm sure you've heard, but you were part of our program during the Big Money Movement. How did that add to, I guess, your year of rest or like your time? Where did we fit in with that?
Really giving me strategy for understanding how to navigate the corporate space. So when I do kind of get back out and about, I'll have the language to be able to, put those proposals together and really for a good quality product to corporate clients. So thank you.
No, thank you. I love it. I love it. Okay. So honestly, for real, my last question this time, I have so much I want to talk to you about is, for the leaders and women entrepreneurs listening, anything that you want to share, like for those who are listening, who might be navigating, they might be in burnout, they might be on the cusp of burnout. And if they're listening to this, is there anything we haven't shared that you just want to leave them with?
I think really just knowing that there is no shame in seeking help and knowing that this is something that you can't navigate alone. So make sure that you do get that support. So if it's reaching out to a therapist, if it's, joining a social group or an organization, just really don't try to navigate this alone.
I love that. I recently had a friend that was talking to me about how like rest is resistance and just talking about as Black women, just challenging the narratives that are a part of our identity so that we can live fuller, wholer lives. And so I think that the work that you're doing is truly life-saving. And I think it's an important message. And I thank you for your time and your commitment. And even for you to say you took a year of rest, like, thank you for being the embodiment of your message, right? So I really appreciate that. That means so much. If you would like to see and hear more behind the scenes conversations about the path of entrepreneurship, corporate conversations like this, then you need to subscribe on YouTube. And you need to make sure that you follow and listen on all your favorite streaming podcast platforms. Thank you again to our amazing guest, Dr. Reba Peoples, the founder of Amara Health and Wellness. And we will see you on the very next episode. Bye.